Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. So today we're talking about Hank Green. Hank Green. Now, who is Hank Green, you say? Do you? Hank Green is an OG YouTuber, in fact a massive one, over 3 million subscribers, 1,200 videos, generally speaking I believe science communicator, among other things. Now here's the thing, I've never been a fan, nor was I necessarily a hater. I just tried to watch some of his videos, didn't really catch with me, and never watched ever since. But I do know that there are a lot of people that like him very much, and recently there are people that are not kind of mad about him for a scandal we will talk about. But I ran into this. From 9 months ago, people really don't like the way Jesus actually looked. Now, look, listen. This is a topic that I put a lot of research in. I made my own videos about. He is renowned for his high-level research and excellency of his scripts. So, of course, when I clicked this, I watched a little bit, I was expecting a highly well-researched, well-put-together video. Now we'll have to talk about those scripts because, again, there was a scandal recently. It seems like he doesn't really write his own scripts now, does he? AI. Without further ado, if you like the guy, again, don't get mad, to each his own. But I think this might qualify for a debunking video. Let's go.
This video is brought to you by the current discounts available at Good.Store, a store that sells really good stuff and gives all of the profit to charity.
Well, that's good.
Just going over to Google, I'm going to type in Jesus and I'm going to click I'm feeling lucky because that's a thing that they still do. Here we are at Jesus. I mean, while we're here.
Oh, goodness gracious, Wikipedia.
Let's give a little money to Wikipedia. It's better than Google now, and it has the budget of roughly 1% of Google's legal department. Jesus. Also referred to as Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, and many other names and titles. That's got a link. Got Jesus. We've got Yahweh. Emmanuel. That's totally different. Master. Logos. Son of God.
So here's the thing, guys. Again, maybe this clicks with some people, but I was expecting a deeply researched video, and instead, this seems to be parody. I think he's being sarcastic, and I guess what the appeal of this is that it's funny. It's funny because he's going to crash out trying to Google and Wikipedia stuff about Jesus and the way he looked. I don't know, it just doesn't click with me. But I'm not trying to be the offended Christian. I mean, it's not saying anything blasphemous, so that's fine. Don't worry, it's freedom of speech. Say whatever you want. But I'm just saying, you're just Googling it? You're just Wikipedia through this thing?
Son of man, son of David, son of Joseph. This guy's got a lot of dads. Sorry, that was overly silly.
No, only one plus an adoptive.
That's not what this video is about. I see pictures of Jesus. We all see pictures of Jesus. There's baby Jesus. Look, he looks like a baby. When Jesus was born, he was naked, probably pretty bald, and he was baby-shaped.
Okay, it was kind of funny that he said he was baby-shaped. That one was funny.
But if we check out, one thing all of these Jesuses are going to have in common is that this guy has got long hair and a beard. He's got long hair and a beard. He was in good shape, Jesus. This guy's got long...
well, actually, if you think about it, working together with his father, who was a woodworker, why not?
Long hair and a beard. He's got long hair and a beard. Long hair and a beard. He's got long hair and a beard. This is what happens to me. I get overly curious about things, and I type in, why did Jesus have long hair? And then I don't look at the AI overview.
That's, you see even this. Don't you look at the AI overview. More on that later.
AI overview. I'd use it if it was working. Give me a Wikipedia page, please. We got true Christian, did Jesus have long hair? We can speculate, but ultimately we don't know. I'm aware. They didn't have cameras back then. No, Jesus did not have long hair. Paul said that it was a dishonor for a man to have long hair. We got early disagreement in the Reddit thread, and also this has 20 upvotes. So like this didn't reach people who know what's going on.
Thank you, because one thing I want to say, since hopefully we can use this as a way to educate on this topic, is that Paul was a Roman citizen. He had his own ideas, but that quote is often misused by some people. I know a thing or two about that because, of course, whenever I say I am a Christian and I believe in Jesus and I accept him as my Lord, Savior, people tell me, don't you know that Paul says that having long hair and you, look at you, yeah, look at me, all right, look at this. I think I've reached my genetic maximum, actually. Thank you. Yeah, you can absolutely be a Christian with long hair. See, Paul, let's get this one out there immediately. Paul was sending a letter to a specific group of people in a very well understood context of their jobs, of their customs, a general idea of length of hair with men. Because here's the thing. Already when it comes to long hair and women, the Bible says it's to have very long, beautiful hair for a woman is a very good thing, okay? The Bible praises women with very long, beautiful, lustrous hair. When it comes to men, however, Paul would have known, and anyone in that congregation would have been very familiar with the fact that long hair is a sign of an alliance with God, specifically ordained and commanded by the Lord himself. For instance, Samson. And that's not even the only thing, because then we have the Nazarites. We'll get to that later. But the Bible makes it clear that God commands men who take specific alliances with him to let their hair grow as a sign. And Paul would have known that. Had you told Paul, but what about Samson? He would have said, oh, of course. That's obviously, no, that's totally fine. So the idea is very long length of hair on a man in very specific spiritual situations is not only perfectly fine, but in fact encouraged by God himself. But if you are someone who just lets his hair grow and looks like shit because you don't look after it, well, that's a different situation. People would have been very cognizant of that distinction in period. So in other words, this idea of, but Paul said that long hair in men is shameful, so Jesus wouldn't have had long hair because of what Paul said. We are not Paulists, we're Christians. Jesus doesn't need to abide Paul's law. It's the other way around. And Jesus was absolutely a spiritual man. I mean, who more than him? And remember, he is the one who is commanding in the Old Testament Samson to let his hair grow. Let's not remove that from the equation. Now, I'll tell you more about Jesus himself, but I'll let him continue first.
Going to immediately disregard this and move down to our second link, Stack Exchange. Oh, Christianity Stack Exchange. I didn't know that was a thing. Also, only 10 upvotes, though. Why aren't people curious about this man's hairstyle? It's a big part of Jesus. This is the Jesus that I feel like I saw a lot. This man has blue eyes.
Very Catholic.
He's got blue eyes. There's a rugged Jesus. He looks...
That's LDS, isn't it?
Older than 33, but okay. This Jesus, seen him around, another long hair and a beard. This Jesus, a very different long hair and a beard vibe. So like some of these Jesus, I'm getting very like a safe guy that I'd feel okay to be around. Like I'd trust him with my drink. This Jesus though, I mean, I'm not saying I don't trust this Jesus with my drink, but he's like a strong Jesus, like a 70s
the joys, right?
Construction worker. We've got AI Jesus here. Stunning Jesus Christ picture printable wall art. Ay. St. Paul says hair is long and unnatural for men. Why do our portraits of Jesus show him with it? The pictures of Jesus we have do not derive from any physical description we have of him in the Bible, because there is none. There's no physical description of Jesus in the Bible.
While he was alive. So it's true. Which kind of tells you it doesn't really matter, right? Because if it did matter, then we would have been told. In fact, the reality is that Jesus most likely looked like the rest of the apostles did, which is one of the reasons why Judah had to signal to the Romans through a kiss which one was Jesus. In other words, had he looked completely different from a first century Jewish person, for instance, being a black African, like some people say, or a Nordic blonde-haired guy, that's all Judas would have had to say to the Roman soldiers. Oh, it's the black guy from Africa. Oh, it's the blonde guy who looks like he's from Scandinavia. Clearly not the case. So he looked like a man of that period. And most likely, he looked like a preacher, which will connect to the longer hair and the beard, by the way. We'll get back to that.
The basic image comes from a long artistic and iconographic tradition influenced, among other things, by the Shroud of Turin. But that isn't...
Shroud of Turin isn't necessarily, no. The Shroud of Turin, I have an entirely dedicated video to it. If you're interested, I'll put a link in the description when I go into everything about it. I'm kind of in the fence for that one. But in reality, the images are a lot more ancient than we have. Do we have period images? No. Maybe they did exist, but they got lost, even if they did. But we do have ancient images, including the ways the Romans represented him.
Jesus? That has to be the other way. When was the Shroud of Turin from? So we've got this Jesus shroud, and he's got long hair and a beard. When was the Shroud of Turin discovered? Oh, 1354. Okay, maybe that was part of it. I don't know why I thought this was relatively new. Maybe this is why Jesus has...
No, the idea is that the shroud was discovered in the Middle Ages. The people that are against the shroud's authenticity say that it is a medieval forgery, whereas the people that are pro, supporting the shroud's authenticity, tell you that it's instead read ancient, and they use the weaving patterns, or for instance the particles that are in there that may be like soil particles that may be connected to the Holy Land. Regardless of which one you believe, is kind of irrelevant anyways, because as Christians we believe in the living God, not the image on the funerary, if you will, cloth. But regardless, I mean, it's interesting. The Shroud of Turin is interesting, but it's not the fundamental, like some people say, oh, if it will change your life if you... No, it's faith that will change your life. If you're a Christian and you say that the piece of cloth will change your life, then there is something wrong with that as well.
Long hair and a beard, is it that easy? Does Jesus have long hair because of the Shroud of Turin? A common objection, ooh, all right, this person has a blog. This is what the internet used to be. Weird stuff from a person who says stuff. A common objection to the Shroud of Turin is that the hair on the main shroud is too long to be Jesus's hair. No, that's the opposite of what I want to know. All right, so we've got like one piece of information already that people back then didn't have long hair, or men didn't, so I could type in like, did men.
You would have to define long hair, because my hair, yes, my hair length would be basically impossible to find. In fact, even a Nazarite, if you don't cut your hair for like 3 years, for instance, yeah, it's never going to get to the length of mine because it took me 7. I'm beyond heavy metal at this point. The length of the Nazarite pact would depend. The bare minimum would be 30 days, and then it would go in multiples, so 60, 90. But some Nazarites would take the oath for their entire life. So one of those, sure, would have looked like me. Even in the Middle Ages, a lot of nobility, like medieval knights, even though they usually have a fringe, because it helps so that you still have to fight, right? So you don't want this to do this. That's the idea, which is why a lot have a fringe. Medieval knights resolved it with a fringe. They kind of look like 80s rock band singers. And then, for instance, the Japanese shaved this part, resolved it that way. Personally, I'd rather go the medieval knight version. But there are some medieval people that would have had hair the length of mine, and it would be the Merovingian kings. So if you look at Merovingian kings, they rock hair just like mine. So if I were to go back into the Middle Ages, they might think I'm a weirdo, but they might also think, is he nobility? Because some upper nobility, particularly in that area, it was actually this.
Men have long hair in biblical times. Is it wrong for men to have long hair? What is that? Do people in biblical times have long hair or long beards? This is Quora. Quora has become really difficult to use as well, by the way. Like, I'm not sure which... So this is like promoted by Savings Pro. Why is Jesus usually depicted with long hair? This reminds me of that game where you have to put different shapes into matching holes. What is happening? Why is the internet so hard now? Things used to be possible. This has 6 upvotes. I think there are at least 2 possibilities. One, artistic depictions of Christ are just simply wrong. Possibility Christ might have been a Nazarite. It's involved a vow which can be lifelong or temporary to abstain. He was from Nazareth, but I think that's different from being a Nazarite. My wife beats me? Why am I being advertised a shirt that says my wife beats me?
Yes, so we don't know if he was a Nazarite. He's from Nazareth, but we don't know if he did that. If possibly not, because he did drink wine, and so Nazarites didn't. Although then again, sometimes one could also argue that there were, I mean, first and foremost, the wine he made through changing water, I think anyone could drink that. I would totally drink that immediately, even though I usually don't drink wine, but I would absolutely drink that. Secondly, it's also, oftentimes he would tell you things like the law of Sabbath, right? So he would tell you, right, it's fine to follow the law of Sabbath, but if your donkey falls into a well and it's Sabbath, so he would bend some rules with logics and morality, which went beyond strict observation that became cold. So maybe he could have had the pact of the Nazarite, but changed some things in some scenarios where he thought was fine. Not being too strict about the law, like don't stone people, like he doesn't want people to stone the prostitute, right? Even though that was the law. So I think both interpretations are possible. Maybe he had the Nazarite pact, in which case absolutely Sarah would have been long, or maybe he didn't, but that doesn't necessarily exclude the possibility at least of a medium length hair, like to your shoulders, for instance, which would still be considered long, although then again, it's long compared to his haircut, but it's short compared to mine. So, that's why I call it a middle length.
Hang in there. It gets worse. Earliest depiction of Jesus. He has long hair and a beard. This is Depictions of Jesus. A mural. One of the first bearded images of Jesus from the 4th century.
The reason why they say this is one of the first bearded is because even though this is 300 years sort of after his death, kind of 3 centuries after period, you have to imagine that he was not born on year 1 born. We know that that was wrong. It was probably, my guess is that Jesus was actually born either in 6 BC or 4 BC. And so if he actually did die at age 33, you have to do the math. And then, even though this is one of the first bearded images, which is very reminiscent of Zeus, by the way, because, I mean, if you think about it, at least from the ancients' perspective, if you're trying to preach this to the Romans, and you want to tell them he's the son of God, who's God to the Romans, Jupiter meaning Zeus, and Zeus is represented like that, so it makes sense that the son looks like the father when you're preaching to the Romans and to the Greeks, or in general the West. So you have to keep that in mind. But the earliest representations of Jesus show him without a beard. Some have short hair, but that's possibly because at the very beginning they were trying to make him look like a Roman citizen, but that didn't work because I guess the Romans figured out the mystic look looks better. I mean, the Romans had that idea when it comes to philosophers already. Long hair and a beard makes you look like someone who's wise.
Look at this 4th century image of Jesus. Here he looks just like a Roman. He's white, short-haired, clean-shaven as he's resurrecting Lazarus. Should we consider this image an accurate representation of Jesus of Nazareth? Here is another early image showing, once again, a beardless young-looking Jesus, this time with black, slightly longer but still short hair, representing the gospel instance of a woman with a problem of an issue of blood being cured by touching his tunic. Young-looking, clean-shaven Jesus keeps appearing throughout the 4th century, as in this sarcophagus of Junius Bassus, Roman senator, where he now starts getting medium-length hair. Images and iconography over time give us clues on how people think, the governing and the governed. Look at these two images. What is going on? What's happening is a deification of the historical Jesus. Jesus starts looking less and less human and more like a god. But what kind of god? A god from the perspective of the Greco-Roman world, to whom he was now preached. What did ancient Greek and Roman gods usually look like? Well, this is Dionysus, and I'm sure you can immediately spot a similarity here. This is what the people were used to when imagining a god. There are of course other looks for gods, but remember, Dionysus is a god of winemaking, and Jesus turned water into wine, so we can see why they went for this look for the people at first. Very famous and often mentioned Jesus in Santa Pudenziana in Rome from 415 Anno Domini. Here we see that the image of Jesus towards the end of the 4th century and the beginning of the 5th century, in this particular instance, is now moving from a young, beautiful Dionysus or Apollos looking god into a wise and powerful god, a ruler. Look at his image at the catacomb of Comodilla, mid-4th century, one of the earliest images of bearded Jesus. In the Greco-Roman world, images of Zeus were very popular and very easily recognizable. It shouldn't surprise us, therefore, that Jesus, when represented as a ruler and a heavenly king, gains a striking resemblance with Zeus, son of God. In perspective.
If you appreciate my content so far and wish to help ensure my ability to continue to tell it how it is, regardless of any possible backlash, please support this channel on Patreon. Any support helps me and my team of academics keep the channel strong and gives us the means to fight back against the political rewriting of history. Stand with us, form the wall, defend the truth. But then again, there are some images that make him look like a young Apollo. Shaved but longer hair. So those are also present. And the reality of all of this, to answer his question, is this. We oftentimes fossilize an image. We imagine Jesus, and he's always a 30-ish-year-old man with long hair and a beard. Yeah, but have you had the exact same length of hair and beard throughout your entire life? The answer is no. So if you were to run into a young Jesus when he was 20, most likely he didn't have a beard. And if you ran into a Jesus that was in his late 20s, almost 30, then yeah, of course his hair length would have changed. And so would have his beard length changed, right? Depending on when you meet him. Now, one of the reasons why I do think that the long hair and long beard look for Jesus is the most probable is because even though in that period it would have been more common to see a shorter beard and shorter hair on men, not a buzz cut, but not a long hair look, still, not only was a preacher, but he very clearly showed that he didn't care about fashion. And in fact, he condemns people who spend too much care for their own appearance because obviously he's a lot deeper than that as an individual. And this tells me that not only He didn't care about what he was wearing. He would just wear something that worked. He didn't care about spending money or spending time into looking the best possible. Basically, he would be the opposite of our looks maxer today, who are all fixated on the perfecting everything about their look. Jesus didn't care about that. But that could have also meant that probably he didn't spend a lot of time, oh, I need to get the perfect haircut every 3 weeks, which means it's very likely that he just let his hair grow naturally. Again, it doesn't mean that he had the hair length that I have, but it also means that he probably didn't care, which would very strongly connect to the idea of he probably had longer hair and a beard that he let grow naturally. It just makes sense if you read the Gospels and read the way he speaks, it just makes sense. We do have a physical representation of resurrected Jesus, though. That one is something we have with we are told he had a white face. Afrocentrics always forget that part. A white face, white hair that looked the color of wool and the color of snow. Not the consistency of wool. That's another thing they misrepresent because they don't know Greek. And his eyes were glowing fire. Now, this is not something I'm going to use to say that that's the way he looked as a mortal man, because again, it's the representation of an immortal being. And in fact, we're told that he had feet of bronze. By the way, specifically gleaming bronze as it gleams in the surface while it's being melted. Not bronze as a polished final product, which is kind of a reddish brown. And in fact, even the final color of bronze depends on its constituents. Ancient bronze most of the times would have looked a dull golden look color, so not brown. But bronze glowing in a surface, which is once again a white, bright color, because it's a resurrected being. But that's not a description of him as he was walking around Roman Judea.
That's before the Shroud of Turin. Why did it tell me that the Shroud of Turin was part of this? Why hasn't anyone have what I think is a very interesting question and have just answered it for me? This is very frustrating. This is the page that
You should have watched my video, sir.
I want, though. Most images of Jesus have common number of traits, almost universally associated with Jesus, although variants are seen. Bearded Jesus, long hair, emerged around 300 AD, but did not become established until the 6th century. Early Christianity, this is 3rd century. Is that Jesus?
No.
That guy does not have long hair and a beard. Which one of these people is? No, that's Jesus. This is Jesus. He's a baby. He just looks like a baby. That's not helpful. Babies don't have long hair, usually, though sometimes. The healing of the paralytic, one of the first images of Jesus. Is that him? Who is it? Which of you is Jesus? None of you have long hair. So the first images we have of Jesus don't have long hair.
Which, once again, the easy way to respond to that is, well, yeah, but if it's a representation of younger Jesus, that would have been absolutely fine. Of course, he went through that.
And now I know that there just wasn't a lot of pictures of Jesus. He's got long hair and a beard. The earliest one he doesn't, but then
That's not the earliest one, by the way.
suddenly he does. And apparently nobody has any idea why. Once the bearded long hair Jesus became the conventional representation, his facial features slowly began to be standardized. This is wild. So we have no idea what this guy looked like, but just through art, people fed into each other and built a Jesus.
See, that's what I mean, though. Again, is this supposed to be like sarcasm? Because he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. He's just reading Wikipedia and then commenting without any base of research on this topic. And once again, you could tell me, and this is the part that I'm going to address the scandal now, you could tell me, no, but he has got his super researched, very high scripted videos where he shines as a researcher, and then this is more of a like lighthearted, funny video. But here's the problem. His very super scripted videos, as being clearly demonstrated, were AI. He had AI write the scripts. So if those are AI generated, and when he's not using AI to tell him what to say and recklessly read through it, the prompts, he does this and there is zero research, then was the research all along just AI? And when the AI is not available, this happens? I mean, I'm not impressed. Some of the things he says are funny, okay? I'll give him that. But I'm really not impressed. And once again, we have to question every of his videos now because, look, ChatGPT isn't smart. It's something much weirder, he writes, which is clearly it's not X, it's Y paradigm, contrastive statement paradigm that AI or ChatGPT uses. So he clearly had ChatGPT write that. When he talks about ChatGPT, it's insane. It's the whole situation about Hank Green accidentally reading an AI prompt feedback left in his script. And then he addressed, and the way he addressed the whole scandal was pretty bad.
Oh man, does it hurt when you see an OG YouTuber getting caught using AI? So Hank Green, for those of you guys that don't know, is one of the most well-respected, well-known YouTubers in history. He actually made a channel with his brother called Crash Course that a lot of people have used
Yeah.
throughout the years to basically consume educational content, and it is always done, in a crash course. So essentially, it is never really longer than like 15 minutes. They are able to explain some really good topics, and I used to even use them, for like science stuff when I was in high school and middle school and stuff like that. Like I said, he is one of the most well-respected YouTubers of all time, but he has recently been caught using AI scripts in his
Yeah.
videos. He made a whole big response to it. We're not going to get into a lot of it. It's a huge rabbit hole. And yeah, like I said, it's a pretty damn shame. So basically, he has a channel called Complexly, and he had a video or, an Ask Hank Anything, and it's
Yeah.
literally titled, Does Hank Green Shave His Butt? This will actually be important later in terms of, the seriousness of this video and whatever.
Man, people really have nothing to do with their time.
And yeah, it's like an hour-long Q&A thing, right? Well, during the Q&A, some people caught something that he said that didn't sound very human.
They matter. There's a thing in there that matters, and that's very cool. A better way to say it, and I appreciate the pushback, is a word is a human invention, and human inventions are made by bodies and brains working together.
He's reading AI.
Guys catch that? So he said, and I appreciate the pushback,
Yeah.
right? Keep in mind, he's just talking to the camera. No one's talking back to him right now while he's speaking. So what does he mean, I appreciate the pushback? Well, obviously, when you are writing an AI script or generating something with AI, and you you push back a little bit, where you essentially say like, oh, could you condense this a little bit? Or could you explain this in a simpler way?
Exactly.
The AI, technology and whatever, they typically do say something like that before they generate you a new response. They're like,
That's how advanced language models do act.
yeah, okay, I'll go ahead and make this simpler for you, and I appreciate the pushback. So he literally used an AI script for a Q&A about whether he shaves his ass or not. I mean, what the hell, man?
And once you know this, and then you go back and watch some of his previous videos, you start seeing it. You see the triplets that usually AI uses, which tend to work adjective, 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 and then they go adverb, adjective. Or like it's not X, it's Y, or it's not just X, it's also Y. It's full of it.
So as you would imagine, he got a considerable amount of backlash for this. Not only do people hate in general when YouTubers use AI for scripts, thumbnails, titles, anything like that, but it's also one of the most original content creators of all time. Hank Green, the guy who made Crash Course with his brother. I mean, like I'm saying, like this guy was a huge source of information for a lot of us growing up. And like I said, one of the most well-respected YouTubers of all time. So he got a ton of hate for this, and he actually released a response to which he has since.
The response is the problem because you see, personally, I do not use AI to write my scripts. I do use AI, however, to check my spelling, to check my punctuation, and to give me alternate, like as a glorified thesaurus, to give me alternative, because I use the word however 15 times in a row in my scripts, and I'm like, AI, can you find me some? So I do use it for that. And then I do use it to add light, cinematic lighting onto my thumbnails. So I make the thumbnail, then I put it into AI, and I ask AI to put the cinematic lighting. I don't think there is anything wrong with that because I have done most of the work, and using advanced language models for language stuff is fine. That's what you use them for. Like if I am having trouble explaining something and I ask AI, can you find me a different way to say this? It's fine. But having AI, you give them a prompt, they write you the entire script, and then you read the script as is, including the freaking AI prompts, is terrible. And so there's that.
Now deleted, and he has now created a new response just fresh off the press. This was only like 40 minutes ago as of this recording. So there was a tweet that was calling him out for using the AI scripts, and this was his original response, which I'm going to tell you right now is really bad. So he responded and said, I produced this under a ton of pressure, so I went and checked my process from start to finish. Before we...
Oh yeah, a lot of pressure. The multimillionaire YouTuber is a lot of pressure, not you that do a 9 to 5, unbelievable.
Didn't read the rest of this. You produced this under a ton of pressure. Brother, this is a Q&A on whether you shave your ass or not. What do you...
Not to mention, guys, it means, I mean, if someone is innocent and is like, no, I don't, that's what you would say. No, that was me. I mean, someone accused me, oh, is this the AI script? And it wasn't. I would say, well, no. Or in the worst case scenario, I could say, look, it's my script. The only thing I did with AI, for instance, is the title. Or it's because I tried to optimize the search engine, and that's it. But if if they accuse you, bro, you're just reading a script from AI, and you say, well, it's because I am under a lot of pressure. You're literally saying, yes, I did. And now you're trying to justify. And your justification is terrible because, no, you don't. You don't have a lot of pressure. What are you on about? Already the content creation subgenre of job or career path is a lot easier than the majority, 90% of jobs out there. 99% of jobs out there. We are extremely privileged. Now, there are some YouTubers that struggle to reach the end of the month because they don't get the views, and so, oh my gosh, I need to pay my mortgage. I get it. That can be pressure, and then you might need to increase. I mean, I myself need to post out like a maniac in order to get the money that I need to support my wife, my child, myself, my father, and all the other people that I help in my life. But still, I wouldn't dream to say, oh, I'm the victim because my job is easy compared to what other people have to deal. But people like him who are multimillionaires, shut up. You have no pressure. No pressure. Zero. You can do whatever you want.
Mean a ton of pressure. Even if this was the most important, serious video of all time. Buddy, you are a YouTuber with millions of subscribers, millions of dollars. You're completely rich.
Yes.
You have no pressure.
True.
You work on everything on your own time and your own guideline. You're your own boss. I'm really sick and tired of content creators acting like they're some sort of victim or whatever. People would kill to be in the position that you are. As somebody who has worked real jobs, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have as well, it really sickens me when I hear like YouTubers and Twitch streamers talk about how much pressure they're under and how, things are getting so tough. Man, get the fuck out. You're your own boss. Are you kidding me? Okay, I'm going on a rant. Let's actually read what he said.
But he's right. He's absolutely right. So again, the responses were pretty bad because he's just justifying, he's not denying anything. The only thing he said is, no, that prompt was not part of, he said that prompt in my script was not from AI. Right? Even if that were true, and honestly, I mean, it really sounds like it was. But what about the rest then? It's weird. Again, someone who is completely innocent when it comes to this doesn't try to say, well, I was under a lot of pressure, and also doesn't say, actually, that sentence was not AI, but what about the rest? What about the previous scripts? So the reality is that a lot of the stuff is AI generated. This is true. And so already I kind of lost respect for his research, because it isn't research when you have an AI write you a script. It's not research, okay? It doesn't count as research. Once again, you can use AI if you need help reformulating things, changing a little bit the body of you don't like the way you phrased it. Maybe the AI can give you some, okay. But you can't have the AI write a script about this and then read it as is, because that's a fraud at that point. And this kind of video, which I hope is not AI generated, doesn't look like it's AI generated, but doesn't have any research whatsoever. And in fact, is annoying me on the other side. So here we are.
I built a Jesus from scratch. Why choose a beard, though? Why was that picked? And why can't I search for this? Trimmed practical beards were standard in Galilee and Judea, as well as many other parts of the Mediterranean, but not long hair. So a way of making him consistent with the visualization of the divine in Rome. You know what I realize, having gone down this rabbit hole for way too long, is that, like, I am me.
Way too long?
I can message people who might have an answer to this question. Here's what I have written. Hello, Dan. I just started working on a video called Why Does Jesus Have Long Hair? And I thought it would be really cool to potentially transition my naive bumbling around into a conversation with you. Is that something you might be into? It would be on YouTube. But first, this has been a weird video, and I'm excited to share this interview with you because it is awesome. But right now, there's a site-wide sale going on at Good.Store. Everything from our tea and our coffee and our underwear and our socks and our eco-friendly cleaning products, all that stuff. You don't even need a discount code. You can get 10% off any order over $50, 15% off any order over $75, and 20% off any order over $100. I live in a very dry place. Sun-Basin soap is some of the best soap I've ever used in my life. You might be giving yourself a little bit of something, or you might be doing some holiday shopping. Either way, all those discounts are available now, and they apply automatically at
discounts, guys.
checkout, so you don't even need a code. All right, now, on to the interview. The internet has failed.
Link in the description. All right, so he invited Dan McClellan. Maybe I should talk about him because, yeah, he's very knowledgeable when it comes to biblical translation, but I've seen him making statements, for instance, defending the freaking Talarico clown, that kind of made me lose all respect for Dan, okay? I'm more than happy to discuss some of his positions on the Bible, if needed, but I have to say, you cannot defend Talarico and be a good Christian. I'm just gonna say it out there. Talarico is an agent of the freaking devil in Texas. There you go.
In my quest to figure out why Jesus had long hair, I've got some information that it was likely that he had a beard. I've got a bunch of competing theories. One of them, I'd like you to know, is that it started with the Shroud of Turin, which is wild because that was discovered 1,000 years after Jesus started being depicted with a beard. So,
yeah. It definitely didn't start there. No. In fact, a lot of people who would point out the Shroud of Turin, one of the reasons it's likely not real is precisely because it reflects a medieval conceptualization of Jesus's appearance, a medieval European conceptualization.
And it was discovered in medieval Europe.
Convenient,
as things often are. Do we have any little pieces of Jesus's body anywhere? Or that's probably not a thing.
Probably not a thing, nor do we likely have pieces of anything that he ever touched, whether a cross or a cloth, or the Sudarion is this famous cloth that it was supposed to have left a sweat imprint from his face, which is related.
I never have that happen with cloths. Like sometimes I put cloths on my face and never is my face there when I take it away.
Well, it's all divine, so it works just a little bit differently for if you're divine.
First question, did Jesus have long hair?
Probably not. The best we can do is try to determine what the average person in this time and place would have looked like.
He was not an average person, though. He was exceptional, right? Any Christian would. I get it that Hank, I guess, is an atheist, fine. But from a Christian, I expect that. From a Christian, I don't expect someone to say, just an average person. In the ethnicity, sure, and I showed you why. But in the looks, no. That misunderstands the entirety of the gospel. He was exceptional with everything else.
And the best we can figure is that he probably had about medium-length hair that probably would not have been very well kept, and
I'm fine with that.
Probably would have had about a medium-length beard. If he were your average first century CE Galilean Jewish person, that's probably what he would have looked like. That's about.
And then again, do you notice though, medium length, great, but the length doesn't stay the same for the entirety of your life. I don't know why people don't concede this possibility that it's so obvious that, yes, if I ran into Jesus at age 29, maybe he had his hair down to his chin, but as I met him again a year after, perhaps his hair would have been down to his shoulders. How is that so difficult to conceptualize when talking about the possible or most probable looks of Jesus?
The best we can do, absent any actual direct corresponding accounts or anything like that.
It's from what I could see, there's not much in the Bible about what Jesus looked like.
No.
And also, they definitely didn't have cameras.
No, nothing like that. No on-the-spot, portrait artists to have him in a tiny little go-kart. They didn't have any Disneyland style, things like that going on.
Caricatures.
No caricatures, unfortunately. Or if they did have him, he didn't feel up to paying for him. And that's kind of the problem is there's no description that is remotely contemporaneous. Sure. And so everybody's just kind of got to make him sound like whatever they want him to look like, which is where we start retreating to kind of tropes and classic motifs of what like a wise person or a divine person might look like.
So when I see more like modern or like 1970s, 80s,
that was a good point,
90s depictions of Jesus, he's got long hair and a beard. He looks like Jesus. He's got like facial features that we seem to have sort of agreed upon over time. But there's also like the vibe changes, and it becomes like there's like a kinder faced Jesus, and then there's like some more stern faced Jesuses. But when I was growing up, there was sort of a very sort of friend looking guy. But you can do that with long hair and a beard. You don't have to do that with long hair and a beard. But I think in a weird way, even up until like my lifetime, the way Jesus is drawn is kind of about the version of Jesus we want to tell people about, reflecting the modern vibes. Like he kind of at this point has to have long hair and a beard, but you can like draw him in a way that like with the culture that I am a part of right now gives me an understanding that is like the current version of Jesus that is being taught in the church that I went to.
It's not quite the Buddy Christ of dogma fame, but it is a gentle, welcoming Christ. That is the Jesus of the late 20th, early 21st century. And this is just the reality of how we conceptualize deities. We want them to reflect our values and things like that. We are creating them in our own image. And I think the long hair and the beard.
I thought he was a Christian. Am I wrong then? We create, maybe he's saying just I'll still man his argument. He's probably saying we are creating them in our own image, meaning the way we represent them. So he's not necessarily talking about the dogma, or the doctrine, which would be, of course, the opposite, that we are created in his image. I'll still man him. I don't want to straw man the guy.
It has just become so embedded within the foundations that to depart from that, you kind of lose the market. And a good example of this is Jehovah's Witnesses. They have tried to represent Jesus in a way that would more accurately reflect first century CE Galilean appearance, where he's got kind of slightly curlier, shorter, bushier hair. And then
sorry, I didn't mean to.
Medium-length beard, and it's just not popular. People are not like, that's my Jesus. That's the guy I want to follow, because it doesn't look like what we expect. And what we expect is such a big part of resonating with the representation of someone like Jesus.
Would that sort of like push those people who are, trying to get people to pay attention to their ideas about Jesus, would it push them to change that conception, or have they sort of like solidified on that as a important part of their faith?
When you look at the representation of Jesus throughout time, and particularly in the last 500 years or so, you frequently see representations of Jesus where it's much closer to the ethnic appearance of the artists. You have Asian-looking Jesuses, you have African-looking Jesuses, because the artists and the communities look like that type of Jesus. And ever since the medieval period in Europe, we've had European Jesus, which now turns into blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus.
Yeah, blue-eyed Jesus. I saw some of those.
I don't actually, the blonde hair would be wrong, but I don't have any problem with the blue eyes, because blue eye as a genetic possibility does happen in the Middle East. It's not impossible. So I don't have a problem with the blue eyes Jesus at all. It's not something I would laugh about. Oh, because it means you don't know anything about the ethnic makeup of the Jews. That happens. I mean, Middle Eastern people too.
Yeah, and we have these accounts, these fake letters about Pilate, where he like sends a letter to Tiberius, and he's like, and I saw Jesus, and he had hazelnut colored hair and then light skin, and the idea is to contrast him against the swarthy skin of all the other Jewish people around him. So there's a very white supremacist kind of Jesus that comes out of the need to represent Jesus in a way that,
well, yeah, of course, this guy, I swear,
vibes with the folks who...
Look how people like him, Dan, they always are ready immediately to go, oh, the white supremacists. They never talk about black supremacists, and now they are turning Jesus into an African, a black African, and then telling you, oh, it's because the hair is white as it's the consistency of wool, and then he has bronze skin, and that's anyone who understands ancient Greek knows they're full of shit. But they never say it. At this point, debunk both. Debunk the white supremacists that make him look like a Scandinavian Norse, and debunk the black supremacists who make him look like an African from Congo. If you are a man of integrity, you'll debunk both like I have. Not just, white supremacists, but then you say nothing about the rest. Come on, it really pisses me off.
Who are wanting to spread that image. And so I think you can incrementally change how you want to represent Jesus, but if you take too large a step, you can't gain the purchase that you need to among your audience. And so I think it's incrementalism is the way to develop your own personal Jesus, as the great poet once said.
Any depictions of Jesus that don't have that vibe, that don't bring people along with it, those fall away and we don't remember them.
They tend to, yeah. And this is the cool thing about some of the earliest depictions of Jesus that we have, because the shoulder-length hair and medium-length beard Jesus really originates around the 4th century CE. And in the 2nd and 3rd century, what we see, sometimes Jesus is represented as kind of a youth at his baptism, where he's even a little androgynous. He has kind of meteor hips and, almost the appearance of breasts, but we see him as a younger character. And then you see representations of him that are kind of drawing on the representation of young deities. The Good Shepherd representation of Jesus is as a young, beardless, medium-length hair, kind of Adonis figure. And this is like Dionysius. This is how the younger deities are represented. And so the earliest depictions of Jesus have him reflecting the conceptualization of young popular deities. And then in the 4th century, it's the Zeus and Apollo ideas of a deity as having longer, curlier hair and a longer beard. That kind of takes over.
That iconography of the king of the gods having long hair and beard, that was well established by that point?
Yeah. In fact, we do see it around the 1st and 2nd century, obviously in Greco-Roman statuary and art and things like that. There are a bunch of different conceptualizations that are kind of competing for each other.
Right.
You had the philosopher Jesus, and the
which is also kind of like a long hair beard vibe.
It's usually a medium length hair and a beard vibe, but it's kind of like a messy one. Like I don't know if you're aware of that website. I don't know if it's still around.
Which I think would be fine, the messy hair look.
But it's like homeless man or tenured professor. It's kind of the scruffy hair. And, like Socrates is represented as kind of being short and ugly. Like you had a bunch of different
slouching.
You had kind of this stock imagery that was associated with your philosopher. And then you had your good shepherd. And then you had your youthful deity. And then you had your elder deity. And so there were a bunch of different things that were kind of competing for how are we going to represent Jesus. And then the 4th century, it's really the Byzantine representation of Jesus as the elder deity that kind of takes over. And
of course, for any Christian watching, clearly what matters is the message, not the way he looked. But when you do ask the question out of curiosity, and there is nothing wrong with asking the question, what did he look like, then it's perfectly fine to start looking at all of these characteristics. So I do, when I made my videos about this, put a lot of time into the research, sometimes there were people telling me, but why do you care? It doesn't matter. Well, it does matter when there are people trying to change it for political reasons, first. And second, it's fine to talk about it as long as you don't make his appearance, skin color, hair length, beard length. As long as you don't make those characteristics the foundation of your worship, that would be bad. But as long as the message is your focus, and the rest is like, but I do like the idea of imagining him when I pray, for instance. What's the best way to imagine him? Then there's nothing wrong with that. So please stop the shaming tactic that some Christians use. It makes you feel better, like, oh, but I know it's the message. I agree. But also, it's fine. It's okay to be curious about the God you worship. It's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it.
And this is where imperial power becomes linked with Christianity. And so that's probably what helps that conceptualization to become anchored to how we're going to think about Jesus. And you have the Pantocrator and the Cosmocrator representations of Jesus that become phenomenally popular in European art, starting in the 4th and 5th centuries and going all the way down to the 19th and 20th centuries, where you start to get lighter colored hair, lighter colored skin, as white supremacy starts to bubble closer to the surface.
White supremacy and all your virtue signaling, Dan. That's why I can't listen to this guy for more than 5 minutes, regardless of his understanding, which is significant, of the ancient text. It's because it just drives me nuts. He has to continuously say white supremacy, so that all of his left-wing followers clap like seals. Can we have a discussion without putting the politics into it? Is it possible? Or can people like him just can't do it? Yes, I am being very critical, because he knows that Hank Green is very left-wing as well. And so now, since he's been exposed to the audience of Hank Green, he's now making sure that he knows, guys, I'm one of you. I hate white supremacists. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, as like our conception of what race is and how much it matters.
Is our God going to be more like us or more like the people that we're enslaving?
The we're enslaving. I swear, this guy. I just can't stand him. I can't stand him. You know that Afrocentrist and Black Power people say the same, right? Do you make that face for them? No, you don't, because you're scared. Coward, say it.
And oppressing, and obviously we want them to be more like us. When Christianity in the Roman Empire is headquartered in Constantinople, you have usually what's considered the start of the Byzantine Empire. You have people from that part of the world who are in charge of things, and so the art is representative of that culture.
Right, and so at that point of all these...
See, that's the difference between me and someone like him. Okay, because I know that there is a chunk of my audience that is right wing. I get it. And then there are people who are not. I debunk the left anyways when they piss me off. I don't care. And I debunk the right as well when they piss me off. I don't care, because I don't pander. People like him do. They make everything about political virtue signaling. I've never heard him. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, and if I'm wrong, I'll say it. Find me a video where he's bitching about black supremacy. Find it, because I complained about both. I have videos debunking Nordicism myths, multiple, and I have videos debunking everybody's black myths of ancient people. Here we are.
These different competing images, the one that is sort of more aligned to the Greco-Roman elder deity is the one that becomes very popular.
That becomes the most popular one, and it gets pretty securely embedded in the foundations of our understanding of who Jesus is for the next 1600 years.
So this is much more of an evolutionary process, and mimetically evolutionary, where it's like, what is the version of Jesus that is stickiest for...
Was that AI generated, Hank?
For people, that is doing all of the work of making people feel like this is an authority that they're going to live their lives by, that they're going to believe in.
Yeah, it's without any kind of firsthand account. The best you've got is what look is going to get the point across. And what is that point that we want to get across? Is it philosopher? Is it miracle worker like Moses? Because you have in some of the catacombs in Italy, you have Jesus with what looks like a magic wand. It's like a mini Moses staff.
That's the one that I showed you before, where it looks like a Roman citizen.
And he's like, dude, but he's got the shorter hair. You've got, what kind of Jesus do you want? And the Pantocrator, the cosmic ruler and all that, becomes the central and the dominating Christ of the Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire. And then into Europe, we've got European imperialism. Obviously, they want that big iron fist.
Yeah, European imperialism. Oh my gosh. Dan. What's next? Are you going to say racist, homophobic, transphobic? You're going to use all of those? We're waiting.
Cosmic ruler, Jesus.
How much of what you're telling me is like pretty like settled?
Has he ever, people like him, European colonialism bad, imperialism, has he ever complained about Islamic warlike expansion? Waiting.
Stuff, and how much do you feel like is like where you're coming from?
I think it's fairly settled stuff. There's a great New Testament scholar named Joan Taylor who published a book back in 2018. I think it's called What Did Jesus Look Like or something like that, where she reviews kind of where the scholarship has been on this. And from what I can...
I've reviewed that book on my video, by the way. I think she missed the mark on a few things, but in general it was okay.
There's not really a lot of debate about these kinds of things. Certainly we have no firsthand account of who Jesus was. The notion that these early depictions that we're seeing in the catacombs and that we're seeing carved in sarcophagi and things like that, those are supposed to reflect classical motifs associated with young gods and older gods and all that kind of stuff. That's a consensus view. I don't really think there's much doubt at all about that. And then we have a bunch of these letters, the letter of Lentulus and the accounts of Pilate and all these. And these are widely agreed to be medieval and later forgeries. And those are the ones that are they're saying, oh, we had shoulder length hair and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, there's not really a lot of room for debate about this, because the notion that anybody has uncovered or is going to be able to uncover any kind of direct evidence. I think there was a body that was discovered first century-ish in a place called Al-Qadama, which is the field of blood, where Judas was supposed to have died. The hair was preserved on this body, and it was kind of auburny hair, and it was about 3 to 4 inches in length. So that could have been representative of the standard coif at the time period, but it probably wasn't somebody who was native to the area, because this grave site was generally used for foreigners, for outsiders, for people who did not have family in the area. So that's the closest we can get to actual archaeological evidence of what somebody might have looked like. The folks who study artistic representations of Jesus, and they're all in pretty widespread agreement. There's not a ton of debate.
I'm actually much less interested in what Jesus actually looked like and more interested in how we settled on a look. Can I ask you to speculate now?
Okay.
Why do you think that the sort of Adonis younger god image of Jesus was sort of competitive there for a little while?
It probably was something that helped the earliest followers of Jesus in the marketplace of ideas, because there are ways that early Christianity kind of looks and acts like a mystery religion. A lot of the mystery religions were associated with rather young deities.
Is that a term, a mystery religion?
A mystery religion would be a religion that had kind of secret rites, where they went into caves, they went underground, they did it in the dark of night, they did different kinds of rituals.
Obviously, they had to do it because of Roman imperial persecution, but here we are.
That were not open to the public.
Appealing.
And a lot of these were popular in schools that were not open to the public.
Appealing.
And
Very what?
of night, they did different kinds of rituals that were not open to the public.
Appealing.
And a lot of these were popular in the 1st and 2nd century in the Greco-Roman world. The figure of Jesus, early Christians were probably trying to compete with those. When you look at the way early Christianity is described, like the earliest description of Christianity that we can probably count on is Pliny the Younger, who says that it's a religion for women and slaves. And so these would have been people who, were not participating in the large-scale public things. These are people who probably would have found a lot. What's that?
The meek.
Yeah, absolutely. That's who Jesus' message would have resonated with, and those were the people who probably would have gotten down with. We got a meeting middle of the night. We're going in this.
And what a weird thing to have become like the thing that is the figurehead of the Byzantine Empire.
Well,
and then also, the current conception of Christianity as a sort of dominant force in culture.
I think the conceptualization of Jesus as more the cosmic ruler is one of the things that facilitated that pivot away from this is the religion of the downtrodden to this is the religion of empire.
Right.
And I think you even see that in the Hebrew Bible, because you have two different conceptualizations of God. You have El, who is the Northwest Semitic patriarchal high deity, who's benevolent and kind. And then you have Adonai, who is the Northwest Semitic storm deity, who is a youthful warrior. And, the divine profile that you want front and center is whatever is going to serve your interests. And so the folks who want to go conquest, they're going to have the warrior deity out front. The folks who want a God who's going to...
Right, but then, the warrior deity part is everywhere in the Old Testament, so you would have to completely reject the entirety of the Old Testament. Warrior deity is part of it, at least when it comes to Yahweh. It is part of it. Or Yehovah, if you want to use that vocalization.
Ensure that their child is born healthy and that they can be breastfed and stuff like that. They're going to have the benevolent elder statesman deity front and center. And so I think the Roman Empire was like, we're going to go with the cosmic ruler guy. And this is around the same time period that women lose their leadership status in the church, because you have women who they're the patrons of churches. They own them, they fund them, they have leadership roles in the churches. And it's like the 5th, 6th century when you stop seeing inscriptions acknowledging the ecclesiastical leadership or the funding of women. And I don't think it's a coincidence that
misogyny.
This is when the power shifts to the empire.
I interrupted you as you were talking about the women and slaves being who Christianity was for, and that having to do with the youthful deity look.
No, Christianity is for everyone and always has been. But of course, it resonated very well with the slaves and people that were struggling because it was giving them hope.
Yeah, I think the youthful deity, the Good Shepherd, is associated with that youthful deity. And I think that the Good Shepherd is one of the earliest depictions we have of Jesus, where he's kind of a lithe, younger figure, and he's got like a lamb on him, and he's got the shorter curly hair and no beard. And I think that would have been the kind of figure that...
Man, it would have been amazing to meet Jesus when he was young. Can you imagine?
Would have resonated more with folks who are looking for guidance and leadership and are looking for someone who's going to understand they're kind of coming from the gutter position. If you're a Les Mis character, the good shepherd who's out in the field and works with his hands and his...
Right, okay, but don't you think he's overanalyzing this, as it often is the case? Because he would have been young at one point. I know there's going to be people in the comments saying Jesus never existed. I don't care what you think, because I'm not someone who believes that. I think that Jesus existed, both historically, in the sense that it's a real historical person and there is more evidence to suggest that he did exist rather than he didn't, and the people that fixate saying there is zero evidence, they are just doing it out of hatred for Christianity. I got 2 massive videos dedicated to whether or not Jesus was historical, but also, of course, as a matter of faith, I clearly believe he existed. So you coming to me and telling me he never existed, it's the same as me telling you Jesus is God. What are we going to do? Like, it's pointless at this point. You believe what you want, I believe what I want. And with that being said, once we decide to accept, even if it's for the sake of conversation, that Jesus existed, then yeah, he would have had a youthful age at one point. So this idea of now they're engineering the image to do, okay, right, but it's still something that would have happened. He would have been working, again, he wasn't born rich, so he would have had to work the field. He would have had to do things that were physical, that the low-born have to do. So all of that is not necessarily engineered. It's something that you can expect from the way the story unfolds.
Young is going to be more appealing than, you know, the guy in the toga and the staff with the long hair and the beard. I think that plays into it as well, that you have the downtrodden and the social outcasts who are looking for a deity who's going to be easier to relate to. And then the Roman Empire gets hold of them and they're like, no.
Let me see how he finishes the discussion then.
Then they're not going to stick around.
And kind of there you have it. I don't know why Google failed me so much, but that is a story that both makes intuitive sense and was...
Google failed you because you didn't put more than 1 afternoon into this. That's why Google failed you, Hank. You should know how research works.
Also very illuminating and illustrative in terms of the details. So that was cool. Glad that I got to do that. Thanks to Dan McClellan. You can find his YouTube channel. It's linked in the description. He's also on all the other social media. Very cool and smart guy.
Yeah, so I hate his thumbnail, by the way. The one on the right is not a representation of Jesus. That is someone who tries to draw someone ugly, which Jesus was not, just to upset Christians. One on the right, not a good image. Never will be. Has nothing to do with research whatsoever. Thanks for watching.